Chinese leader Xi Jinping will help end Russia's war against Ukraine. This bold statement was made today by United States President Donald Trump, who held a meeting with the leader of China in the South Korean city of Busan. They announced a consensus and agreed to continue the dialogue on resolving the war in Ukraine. But it's very important not to fall for China's trick here. The thing is, Xi Jinping voiced a key quote that means only one thing. But China supports the idea that Ukraine and Russia should be left one-on-one. And we just need to see how it all ends. And unfortunately, Trump seems to have supported this idea. And I'll quote Trump. "We talked for a long time with Xi Jinping about Ukraine. We agreed that both sides are bogged down in fighting, and sometimes you need to give them a chance to fight." Let's summarize the meeting between Xi Jinping and Donald Trump together, specifically in the context of Ukraine. My name is Pechiy. Today is October 30th on the calendar. Next, everything in order. But before we start this episode, I ask you to subscribe to this channel, give it a like, and write any comment under this episode. Also, subscribe to my Telegram channel, Pechiy News. It's called that. The link to it is in the description of this video. There we publish breaking news as it comes in. If you want to support the work of this YouTube channel, you can do so with any donation or by becoming a sponsor on YouTube. All the links and details on how to do this are in the description of this video. It says there, support the Pechiy channel. Choose any format that is convenient for you, and I will be grateful for any support from you. So, United States President Donald Trump stated that he had reached an agreement with Chinese President Xi Jinping to work together on ending Russia's war against Ukraine. Quote, "We talked with Xi about Ukraine for a long time. We agreed that both sides are bogged down in fighting, and sometimes you need to give them a chance to fight. It's madness, but Xi will help us, and we will work together on Ukraine." Also, according to Trump, he discussed with Xi Jinping Beijing's purchases of Russian oil, but did not go into details of that conversation. He hinted that China needs oil, so where else can they buy it? Before that, Trump imposed sanctions on Russia's two largest oil companies, Rosneft and Lukoil, which led to the suspension of some oil supplies to China and India. Overall, the head of the White House called the meeting with Xi Jinping remarkable, but the decisions made during it outstanding. On a scale from 1 to 10, Trump rated the talks at 12. He emphasized that he agreed with the leader of China on almost everything. According to him, Washington and Beijing will soon sign a one-year trade deal. Quote, "And now every year we will review the terms of the agreement, but I think it will last for a long time." He also said Beijing pledged to stop fentanyl exports to the United States. Quote, "As you know, I put a 20% tariff on Chinese goods because of imported fentanyl. That's a big tariff. I lowered it to 10%, said Trump. Let me clarify that at the moment the tariff rate for China is at 47%. In addition, the parties reached an agreement in the field of agriculture. And, as Trump says, a huge amount of soybeans and other agricultural products will be purchased by China immediately, right now. Trump also announced that in April 2026 he plans to visit China on an official visit. And after that, Xi Jinping may come to the United States. The two countries' leaders met for the first time since the trade war began in May, when United States tariffs on Chinese goods rose to 145% and China's tariffs on United States goods hit 125%. The countries agreed to temporarily lower them to 30% and 10% respectively, and began negotiations on reaching a permanent deal. Trump and Xi Jinping's meeting lasted 1 hour and 40 minutes and ended without a joint press conference. The Chinese side has not commented on the outcome. To be more specific, according to Trump, China will begin the process of purchasing American energy resources, particularly oil and gas from Alaska, which should become part of an alternative to buying Russian oil and gas. But China has not commented on this part yet, and by the way, Taiwan was not discussed. Both leaders ignored the island's independence question, despite expectations. But despite all the loud statements, not everything went smoothly. Before the meeting, where delegations sat across from each other at the negotiating table, in other words, it wasn't one-on-one, but with full delegations, Trump suggested that the discussion might last 3 or 4 hours, but the leaders parted ways after just an hour and 40 minutes. Moreover, after the negotiations ended, Trump and Xi Jinping did not hold a joint press conference. The United States president immediately left South Korea and headed to Washington, while Xi Jinping continued to participate in the Asia-Pacific Economic Cooperation Summit. Asian Technological. Interestingly, just a few minutes before meeting with his Chinese counterpart, Trump wrote on his social network Truth Social that he had ordered the Pentagon to immediately begin testing nuclear weapons, since other countries are doing so. By the way, I talked in more detail about the agreements between Trump and Xi Jinping in the previous episode, where you can find all the details. Here, I'll focus on the fact that China allegedly agreed to buy energy resources from the United States. And according to Trump, there could actually be a very large-scale purchase of oil and gas from the major state of Alaska. Trump also said on his part that they discussed a possible settlement of Russia's war against Ukraine, but the issue of oil was not discussed in detail. Next is a quote: "Ukraine was discussed very seriously. We talked about it for a long time, and we are both going to work together to see if we can achieve something. We agree that the sides are stuck and fighting. Sometimes they just have to fight. Apparently it's madness." But what's interesting next? According to Donald Trump, Xi Jinping is going to help the United States with resolving the war. But there's a lot we can't do, says Trump. Quote, "Beijing has long been buying oil from Russia, which covers a significant part of China's needs. And, I can say that India is acting very properly in this regard. But we didn't really discuss oil. Today, we talked about trying together to end this war. It doesn't concern China, it doesn't concern us, and I would like it to end." And that's very, very dangerous. The President of the United States doesn't like to see thousands of young people, mostly soldiers, dying in the war. He noted that this war does not concern the United States. On the contrary, the country is even making a profit. However, according to him, money does not matter in this case. Trump emphasized that the United States supplies weapons to NATO countries, which buy them at market price and then transfer them to others. Well, obviously mostly to Ukraine. Trump added that the parties discussed this issue and agreed to work together to try to resolve the Russia-Ukraine war. But this is where all the danger lies. Trump publicly repeated Xi Jinping's claim that China is not involved in this war at all, although that's not true. Donald Trump himself had previously stated that China is financing Russia's war against Ukraine. Now Beijing can simply say, even Donald Trump admitted publicly that we have nothing to do with this. So leave us alone completely, leave us in peace while we continue to help the Russians wage war against Ukraine. And secondly, Donald Trump may not have realized it himself, but he repeated a point that the Kremlin has been trying to promote for a long time. Once again, Trump says, quote, "We agreed that both sides are bogged down in fighting, and sometimes you just have to let them fight." So, Trump is repeating Xi Jinping's point that basically let Ukraine and Russia fight on their own. This is not our war. We have nothing to do with it. We can just watch and wait for the right moment. Like, it's not always necessary to interfere and try to manage this war. He says, no, listen, let them fight. They're stuck. Let's just watch how they keep fighting. And also, Trump spread a very dangerous idea that supposedly Ukraine and Russia are both bogged down in this war. And that's why it's better not to help Ukraine, but just leave them one-on-one and watch. So I think that's exactly the message Xi Jinping was trying to promote. Like, listen, we have our own problems, let's solve the trade war and so on. And the war in Ukraine, yeah, listen, they're stuck in it themselves. Well, sometimes you just need to let them fight. But let's see how ready China actually is to help end the war, as Donald Trump assures us. I'll leave it at that. Share your opinions and conclusions in the comments below this episode. Subscribe to the channel, hit the bell, and don't forget to like. That's all for now. Take care. Goodbye, everyone.